Hello, welcome to Coffee with Vic. I'm your host, Vic Vogel. And today we're going to be covering a subject that focuses on the trade wars and basically how I believe, again, if mishandled, not necessarily, well, maybe trade wars, by their definition, are flawed capitalism. Because I don't know if you create a trade war, that by definition you're actually doing the right thing relative to trading, or at least it seems to be that's the case where we are right now. So I kind of wanted to step back a little bit for just a minute and talk about capitalism. Now, I've done a whole video series on these, and you can go to my YouTube channel, and I'll put the link to that channel in my description here, and I'll put it on the Facebook, on my Facebook page, Coffee with Vic, also. So you can go back and look at that series. And it's actually a series on capitalism and socialism. And I think you'll find it interesting because I think people are trying to take sides on this, and that's a difficult thing to do in our country and, in fact, in the world in general. So that whole series is aimed at something like that. But then there's a section in here in that series called Flawed Capitalism. And I think you'll find that pretty interesting because it talks about what can happen when you approach capitalism from the wrong perspective. And why some people think it's bad stuff, when in reality it gets down to like trade wars, it gets down to the person and the leadership and how it's being implemented. So, capitalism, by its definition, is really in its purest form, it's about people who own the capital, who own the industries, who own the money, the Amazons of the world, the Facebooks, the Apples. We're finding more and more companies disappearing and fewer companies getting larger and controlling the vast majority of wealth in the country. And then that gets down to individuals controlling the vast majority of wealth in our country. And capitalism is really designed to use what you have to make more money to make yourself more wealthy. And unfortunately, flawed capitalism basically takes advantage of people and to do that. So we have an unbalance of not just wealth, but welfare in the country based on your status and your money and the class that you fall in. So hence, that's why I think the title of that video is "Flawed Capitalism: The Fastest Way to Socialism." So you want to definitely watch that, but you need to understand that about capitalism, and keep this in mind as we talk about our topic today, which is trade wars, and that is capitalism is designed to primarily uh, keep you in the money. If you own the money, it's designed to regenerate that money and make you more and more wealthy, and to try to keep that money centralized into yourself. Now, that's a purest form of capitalism. Doesn't mean it's the only form of it, and doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good. It's just the way things are, and we can have some significant class divides when that gets accentuated one way or the other. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what are trade wars? Okay, how do trade wars work? trades are based on tariffs where countries send in products into our country, like China. Let's just take China because that's where we are with this right now. China will send in products like Apple iPhone parts and uh, computers and food and a vast majority of things we buy, clothing. You look at the tags, they all say made in China. And they come from China. China sends them in, and the United States puts a tariff on those, which is basically a tax saying how much they're going to charge us to bring a particular product into a port so that it can be sold in the United States and the money sent back to China. So the country gets some money off of those tariffs. Now, the argument here is it's been unbalanced. The taxes that we charge are far less than what China charges us when we bring products into their country. And we wanted to balance that out. Now, there's ways to do that through negotiation and talking and understanding about the dynamics between the two countries, etc. But unfortunately, what we have right now is a situation where the President of the United States, who you almost have to question his knowledge about this stuff, because even his people who are the heads of the department who are conducting these negotiations are saying that what he is saying when he says China's going to pay for all this isn't true. Because here's what happens: China sends in a certain amount of money, our product, into the country, and companies buy this product and they resell it to us. Okay, and they upgrade the price on that depending on to cover those tariff costs that the Chinese have to pay. So the Chinese have a price they sell to companies in America, and then the American companies upscale the price to cover the costs that they have to pay the Chinese to buy their product and resell it in America. So that's sort of how that's working. Now, what happens with this trade war where there seems to be an escalation of the tariffs? So we put 25% and 30% additional costs on the Chinese products. What Trump is saying is the Chinese will pay that difference to get their product in the United States. When in fact, what happens is the people who are buying the Chinese products to resell our American people are the ones who are paying that price. Okay, they are having to pay 25 to 30% more to buy those Chinese products and bring them into the United States and resell them. Well, they can't cover that cost, so that cost comes back to me and you. We end up seeing things go up in price. Now, how does that affect this idea of capitalism where people are trying to make more and more money for themselves? So, because what you're saying is basically what happens is that manufacturer is just covering their increased costs. So you can't blame them for that. And you really can't. You need to kind of get your coffee like I do here, because this is a heavy topic. That's good. Okay, so but here's where capitalism, flawed capitalism, goes awry here. Uh, and I saw this from a news article, to be honest with you. It was a news presentation. I think it was on CBSN News. I watch that a lot. Uh, and it talked about the lady who was financial guest on that show was talking about how this works. And you would think, well, they're going to upscale the charge to us on a product. And they do. So she picked out wash machines. And so what happened is wash machines, they interviewed various resellers of wash machines that were made in China, shipped to America, and then resold in department stores all over the country. And, And the price of the wash machine, because of this tariff war, the increase on tariffs that the Chinese are having to cover, and they then in turn charge it back to this reseller. The reseller increased the price of wash machines by $80 over what those wash machines cost before this tariff war began. So you can see how in the end it's not the Chinese who are paying for this. It is in fact the resellers of those machines when they come into the country from China to us, and they then upgrade the price to cover their cost. Okay, so that's what's going on here. And so what's happening is we're paying $80 more for a wash machine. And you go, well, okay, they're covering their costs. But that's not where it ends. Okay, here's where flawed capitalism comes into play. Dryers. When people buy wash machines, a lot of times they buy dryers with them. They buy them as a combination. And what happens is there is no increase in tariff on dryers, but because people buy dryers with wash machines, companies are saying, hey, I'll go ahead and increase the same percentage on the dryer. So they're paying an increased cost on the washer and an increased cost on the dryer, and basically explaining it out that, we've got these tariff increases when there is no tariff increase on dryers, or there wasn't. They were just making that extra money. In other words, they were sort of price gouging. They were taking advantage of people by charging them more for that dryer because they knew those people were going to buy those dryers along with the wash machines. And a lot of people don't understand enough about this tariff stuff to even ask the question, are you telling me the dryer costs more? I mean, they put a tariff on the dryer too. And then he would either have to lie to you and say yes, or he would have to say no and say, well, that's just how we're selling it. And that's when you would catch him and you would say, then you're price gouging me is what you're doing. Now, if gasoline companies did that during a hurricane, a disaster scenario, they would get fined. They would get fined for doing that because that is in fact against the law. But here we are in this tariff situation, and they do it the same way. It's the same thing. They're just simply price gouging you because they can. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the heart of pure capitalism in its purest sense if it's flawed. If it's not accounting for or having a concern for the general welfare of the public. In other words, yes, we're providing you something you use, but we're really going to take advantage of you while we're providing it. And that is the problem with tariffs as they are going on right now and as companies are taking these things. So it would be, for example, the same thing could be integrated into an Apple iPhone. They could say, hey, look, we got a large percentage of increase on these Apple iPhones, when in fact it's not an increase on the Apple iPhones. It may only be an increase on a particular part or a battery or something like that, but they put it in, package it as, hey, it's a total cost increase. Okay, so this is the dynamic that goes on here right now. And that's where you tie trade wars to flawed capitalism. And really, the problem is not capitalism. I could see the person having to cover their cost that was increased because of this trade war. Although you have to ask the question, why are we doing that to start with? Think about the farmers and what they're having to put up with along with this. I mean, we already see these trade wars are costing them about an 18 or 20% decrease in their business. If at that rate, because their margins are so thin. Their margins are so thin. A 20% decrease in business and selling their products is it can put them out of business. You know, they won't have any other choice, but banks are not going to loan people money on money they can't pay back. So it's just going to put them out of business. So that's why Trump is in now in his second round of saying, hey, we need to bail out these farmers for another $16 billion. We already gave him, or he already applied for 12 billion, but now he needs 16 billion, but he's still taking this tack on the trade wars. And his whole concept is it's going to pay off. It's like gambling. It's like gambling. I'll roll the dice and I'm pretty sure I'm going to come up with the right roll, but you don't most of the time. And you end up suffering. So you go borrow money from over here and you roll the dice again. And eventually what happens is you come to a head, you know, you have to deal with it. And that's where we are with the trade wars. And unfortunately, there are people during these trade wars that have seen a weakness where people don't understand what's going on and people aren't asking the right questions when they're buying products now. They're simply saying, oh, you're saying it's an increase. So I want to know, is the cost for a particular product totally affected by this trade war, or only a small portion of that product going up that much, and you're just taking the whole product up that much? So you need to begin to ask questions as consumers. We need to challenge this. And I encourage everybody out there, when you're buying something like a washing machine where it's a combination of things and they're telling you that the trade war tariffs are taking something up, you need to question exactly what about this product is under the trade wars and what portion of this product is not under the trade wars, is not under the tariff control, that didn't go up because of this. This is the dilemma we live in when we have somebody like a CEO trying to run our government, because the CEO is not interested in the long run. It's making their company bigger and making themselves richer. That's the way they all are. That's the capitalistic approach to things. Unfortunately, uh, we've reached a point where that becomes more predominant than the people who are making the business operate. They don't get to share in that comes. It's kind of like the Uber drivers and Uber. You know, Uber says, you know, we're going to have unhappy people. We're trying to figure out how to minimize or eliminate the cost of drivers, but we need them to drive until that happens. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. You just had a stock IPO. Why would you not offer the drivers a discounted opportunity to buy into your company and get them on board with this? Even if you're going to eliminate, you're not going to eliminate them in the next 2 to 5 years. You need to figure out how to make them part of your organization. But that's not their thought process. Their thought process is flawed capitalism. It's all about making money from the company and consequently making money from me. And I don't care how it impacts these people down here, but I need them. I desperately need them to get in those cars and drive. And unfortunately, the people desperately need to get in those cars and drive because in many cases, they don't have any other opportunities out there. So that's flawed capitalism and how trade wars are impacting that. And ladies and gentlemen, it's just getting worse and worse and worse as we go down the road. So people wonder why we need to do something. We need to do something because if this guy is allowed to keep that, and I'm speaking of the president, if he's allowed to keep on going, no telling what he's going to do with this country before 2020. It scares me. It scares me. I mean, he is not a rational, logical man. I'm not saying he's insane, but I'm telling you what, he is not someone who belongs in the position of the president of the United States who cares about the people of this country. He has not delivered to the farmers, and now they're beginning to rebel. You speak about the coal miners. The coal miners in West Virginia now are trying to get their state legislation to back green energy. They know that's the future. They see coal going down the drain. The promise of reopening those mines and redistributing and putting coal back all has gone away. You have heard nothing about that. It's gone. It's history. These people are starving to death off of a promise undelivered again, just like the walls a promise undelivered. The transportation infrastructure is a promise undelivered. It's not the Democrats, ladies and gentlemen. It's the man who's in charge. When you're a leader and you're in charge of something, you don't blame everybody else for when it doesn't happen. You figure out how to get it together and make it happen. That's why you're leading. But that's not happening in this case. And in fact, those people are pushing their senators and everybody to start green energy, to start putting it in West Virginia, because that would create jobs, that would create cleaner energy, that would help on climate change, which we all know is affecting us, except a few idiots up there who don't know. But this is where capitalism grabs a hold of you when you're trying to support the vast majority of large money and not considering your primary role in government, which is the general welfare and security of this country. It's in the preamble of the Constitution: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, the general welfare of life, the security of being able to live here and be free no matter who you are, and an opportunity to pursue the happiness that you want. When it starts cycling up into the top 1 or 2%, I mean, people are now talking about, do we need to break up Amazon? Do we need to break up Facebook? They don't know how. What would happen if you broke up Amazon? Oh my God, people would go nuts. What would happen if you broke up Facebook, or that we're doing right here and now, putting things on Facebook that you can see? What would happen if we tried to break all that up? How do you do that? They don't know. They have no idea how to do that. This is the state we're in under the leadership we're in. We got to change it. We got to get the people in positions that have character, who have quality, who have morals and ethics and character into the leadership of this country, and have the knowledge base to take us into the 21st, 22nd century environment. And we need to do that for ourselves currently, and most of all for those who are coming in behind us. So, uh, that's pretty much all I have to say on trade wars and capitalism. But you need to become educated on this. You need to research it, become educated. Don't listen to people at rallies. Don't listen to people at rallies. Look at the facts of what's happening to folks, and go out and talk to people who are in the middle class and ask them if they are much better off than the people who own their companies that they work for. They go in there every day and labor to make those companies successful, but they don't get the same rewards back for it. It's always been that way for a long, long time. And I think people are kind of getting fed up with it. I think they're kind of saying, hey, we're going to turn it and we're going to be equal. Yes, we need you to work, but you need us to work too. If all Uber drivers stop driving, Uber dies. It's simple. Nobody drives a car. Nobody comes picks you up. Your app is just dead in the water. It's useless app. Okay, so they're getting there. They're getting that's what the strike was about. They're getting there. So just take some time and think about this. Go research it. Most of all, let's change the leadership. Let's get them out. They're archaic. They're old. They're not thinking. They're not knowledgeable. They're focused on the wrong things, and most of all, they lack character. They lack leadership, morals, and ethics out there in the world. Okay, this is Coffee with Vic. I'm your host, Vic Vogel, and we'll try a different topic next time. Until then, have a good day.
I'd like you to take the time to visit my YouTube channel, and while you're there, please subscribe to the channel. The link is below and will be posted in descriptions. And while you're there, go ahead and click on this bell for notifications to let you know when new shows will start.